Hi Stampers, thanks so much for being here today. I'm Anna Helman. Do you ever get stuck with a certain stamp set or die or certain product in your stamping collection that you just aren't sure how to use it, or maybe you want to use it in different ways and you can't come up with very many ways to use it? Sometimes I like to do videos that show you a lot of different ways to use a particular product to help inspire your creativity to use the products you have in a lot of new ways. Today in this video, I want to show you, I forgot to count, eight different ways to use one die. It's a neat die, it's a background die, you can use it as an overlay, but I'm going to show you 8 different ways, very different ways to use this one particular die. So hopefully this will help inspire you ways you can use the products in your collection. Let's get started. The die I'm going to be using is this one right here. It's from a set called the Organic Beauty Dies, and it's part of a bundle. This is the stamp set that it goes with. So I'll be decorating all of these cards with this set right here. But sometimes, you know, a die like this, well, it's very obvious. You can cut this out and use it as a background on a card. But can you do anything else with it? Absolutely. And let's get started. I want to share some of these ideas with you. So my first 3 ideas have to do with creating a template out of a piece of window sheet. And so I'll explain quickly how I cut this out, because anytime I try to cut through window sheet, a lot of times I have difficulty with it. So if you want to try this, what worked for me is I laid my die on top of the piece of window sheet, and then underneath I laid a double layer of copy paper. And then because this is a large die and I'm using window sheet, which is hard to cut through, I cranked it through my machine and back, through my machine and back, and through my machine and back several times. Now, each time I could hear it popping and cutting into the cutting plates. You know that sound it makes when it cuts through your paper into the cutting plates? I did it, I don't know how many times, until I didn't hear any more of that popping. And when I took it out, it was fully cut except for 1 or 2 little teeny spots. And I cut those with my snip. So that is a tip for how to create this. Now, the reason I wanted to cut this out of window sheet is because it creates a reusable template, kind of like a stencil or a mask, that I can use in a lot of different ways. So what I did, I took my multi-purpose glue, I put little dots all over at the intersections. I didn't do all of them, just several dots across this. You could also use a sponge and a very thin layer of this to blot across it and then set it aside to dry. Once that's done, you have a template that is sticky on the backside, and you can lay it on a project and use it in some of these ways I'm going to show you here. So the first way is to use it with blending brushes. Here is a card I created. I laid this on my project. I used my blending brushes and some Blushing Bride ink, and I was able to create this really nice background. So here's a piece of cardstock. I will quickly demonstrate this. I used this enough times. I think some of the adhesive may have come off the back, so we'll see if this stays in place. But I'm going to pick up some of the color with my blending brush from my Blushing Bride pad, blot a little bit on my scrap paper here, and start blending using a circular motion. This one I am not going to do quite as fully as I did my finished card. And here you can see, because my adhesive is not all holding, this is trying to pop up some, so I have to make sure to hold it a little bit better with my fingers. But I'm just going to do a really light coating around the edges on this one right here. On my sample card, I did it a little bit more fully, like I said. But once you are done, you can lift up that mask and you have a beautiful background from the ink and the blending brushes. So that's idea number 1. My second idea, which also has to do with using this template, is to use spritzers. Now I'm going to bring in a larger piece of grid paper because spritzing can make a little bit of a mess. So let's bring in another piece of cardstock. Spritzers are a fun tool to have in your collection for like every once in a while kind of projects. Let's lay this down. And for spritzing, you don't really have to have adhesive on the back. If it is held down to your project, it helps to get a little bit more clear image. But here is my spritzer. I put some water in this and some Starry Sky ink. I think I put about 6 or 8 drops of Starry Sky ink in here. Now I do actually prefer to use rubbing alcohol because it dries faster. It doesn't warp your card quite as much, but water totally works as well. And then depending on the look you want, you can practice with this. You can pull back 6 or 8 inches, or for what I did, I pulled back more like probably about 12 inches. And you can spritz however many times you want. If you want more full coverage, you can keep going. But this is how I created the background for this card I will show you right now. And for this one, just for something a little bit different, I decided to lay that mask at an angle, okay? I want to inspire some creativity. Let's think out of the box. We don't have to put everything on square. We don't have to put it on just like a background. So that may be a little bit difficult to see, but hopefully you can see that pattern where I had spritzed over it and then just added this really simple stamped flower on top. So that's idea number 2. Number 3 is the same idea as the 2 I have just shown you, but once you have that template attached to your project, you are going to use some embossing paste and a palette knife or some kind of tool to spread that paste over the template. Once you have it the way you like it, you remove the template and set this aside to allow it to dry. So for this one in particular, I used shimmery embossing paste. If you are new to paste, if you haven't really used it or don't know much about it, if you'd like to know more, I have a great tutorial with all kinds of ideas for how to use it. I can link to that in the video description below. So then I finished this just with some simple flowers that I cut out of some pearlescent paper. Hopefully you can see how pretty those are, and added the little greeting. Okay, idea number 4. Let's look at a couple that are not using that template, not using the stencil that we created. Number 4, and many of you just love these. They're so much fun. Idea number 4 is to create a shaker card. Now, I didn't fully assemble this because for anybody who maybe hasn't done a shaker card or isn't completely confident in making shaker cards, I just wanted to show you how easy this is. What I did here, I attached my die cut template on top of a piece of window sheet that measures the same size. Okay, so I just added a little bit of glue to the background, glued it down to that window sheet. I put my decorations on top here just to have that ready for you. On the back side, I attached my foam adhesive strips, and I wanted to make sure in the corners we have no gaps so that when we have this assembled, the sequins do not fall out. Now, I will admit this particular die is not perfect for creating shaker cards because the outline, the border around the edge is very narrow. It is not as wide as my foam adhesive strips are. So let me show you what I mean. If you look close, you can see those strips just on the edge. So usually when you put a shaker card together, you don't want your foam adhesive strips to show. I knew they were going to show here. Make sure my sequins are ready and we can put this down. But I knew those foam strips were going to show a little bit. So I decided to do a white background so that they're not as noticeable, okay? So now that we have this put together, we have these lovely sequins in the background, and I thought that was a really nice way to use this die as well. Number 5, let's take a look at number 5. Now, typically when we create these dies, we look at the piece that is actually cut out that looks basically like this piece of metal, and we use that piece, right? Several of my next ideas actually have to do with using the in-between pieces, or at least some of the in-between pieces. So here is one I was able to create very simply, actually, because when I cut it, all of those pieces stayed attached to the grid, to the actual die that I was trying to cut, okay? They stayed in there. When you use specialty papers like foil papers, for example, or this one I've been using a ton, this is called Fine Shimmer. I just love it, it's so pretty. When I die cut with these specialty papers, a lot of times they have like a really thin plastic coating on the back or something that helps hold these pieces in. So if I want to pop them out, it's not hard to just poke on them and pop them out. But if I want to leave them in place, I can do that. So what I did with this one, all of those pieces were still there, just waiting to be popped out if I wanted to. I just popped out a few of them. I flipped it over on the back side, put glue on the rest of it. I wanted to make sure I got glue on the back of each one of these pieces just to make sure they stayed in place. Glued it on and then finished this off. So I thought that was a really fun way. If you have an overlay die like this, or if this is one you would love to add to your collection, then you can leave some of those pieces in place. You could actually leave all of them in place. I was going to make a card that way and I did not get around to it. I had so many other ideas, but that's an idea as well, is to leave all of those pieces in place and use it to look more like an embossed background than a die cut one. Next, number 5. This is going to be fun or maybe a little messy for your taste, but I thought it was a fun thing that we could try, which is to do a little weaving. So let's say you have paper strips. You could weave paper strips in and out of this, create like a basket type look. You could do it a lot of different ways, create different looks. But I decided I would weave a little ribbon, and I've done this, and I know this looks super crazy right now, so give me a second till we get this card put together. It will look a little bit less crazy. It's still gonna be a little messy, so this card will not be for all of you, but here is one weaving technique where you can just weave it above one of the strips, below one of the strips, above, below. What I did for this one is a little bit, I wanted some more texture. I wanted something messier, crazier, more exciting. Let's live on the edge, stampers, right? Let's live on the edge in our crafting. Let's try new things. So what I'm doing, I just went over that little strip. Now I'm coming back under. My sewing skills can come into play here. Coming back under and through that same opening again. Okay, I'm going to go down through the next opening. I'm going to come up under the next piece. I am going back down through the previous opening. And I know this looks a little, you're like, Anna, what are you doing? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. That's what we do when we're creative. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I think this is going to work. I looked at it with the rest of my pieces before I started. I think it's totally going to work. So I'm coming back up through that same hole. Okay, let's stop. So that's what I did on these other ones. I know they look crazy. Now to put this piece onto my background, I can do several things. One is to use that technique where you can use a silicone craft mat. I've shared this before several times. Use a sponge, get a little bit of glue on it, and sponge across the back. Because I did not prepare that, let's just add a few little dabs of glue across some of these. I'm going to glue this in place and then finish this card off in just a minute. I've got the rest of the pieces created. I know you're on the edge of your seats wondering, like, is this going to be a wreck or is it actually going to look okay? So stick around, we'll take a look at it, and then I want to show you I have the rest of my card ideas for using this die already prepared. I will show you those in just a second. So if you have a hard time attaching detailed die cuts like this, this honestly is the way I normally do it. This glue is awesome. You only need it in a few places for everything to stay put once you attach it. I want this way. But you can use that trick with the sponge and the same glue. You can use adhesive sheets and put them on the back of your die cut before you cut it. Those are awesome. Then it basically turns it into a sticker. But I usually don't think far enough ahead to remember that I need to put those on before I die cut. And then after I die cut, I'm like, okay, now what? I really wish I would have done that, but I didn't. So let's sit this here. I am going to put a weight on top of this. You know what? We can finish this up. Okay, I can put a weight on it after we're done. So let me put my prepared piece on right here. And I do want a little bit of adhesive to hold some of these ribbons in some certain spots. So I want these end ribbons going a certain direction. I can put a little bit of adhesive down so that they stick out and show where I want them to. Let's put this on, see how it looks. And I will trim some of my edges here in just a second. I put loads of dimensionals on the back of this because I knew it was going to need it to hold everything in place. Let's trim my ends, and then you can judge whether this was a creative project or a project you would not choose to make. Both are okay. But just an idea, the weaving I think is a really neat idea. I decided to go the kind of like messy, crazy route, but you could go the other route like I showed and just go up and down, or use paper strips to do the same thing. So here's some more of that fine shimmer paper. I just love that. I think it adds so much to projects. So we have two more, right? Number 7. 7 and 8 have to do with using the scraps, using these pieces that were left over after I created some of the die cuts, okay? So there are, I'm sure, lots and lots of ways you can use your scraps. My first one, I used all of those scraps. Now, you can do this a couple of different ways. Pretend this piece is your die cut, an actual die cut, not your die. I guess you could use your die. But you lay your die or your die cut, it would need to be your die. Cut, your die cut. Lay it on your project. Don't glue it in place. If you want to put some removable adhesive on the back, you can. Just put it in place, and then you start attaching these one at a time in between, and then once you're done, you remove your die cut, and you have this look. But my friends, I did not spend nearly that much time doing this. Here's how I did it. When I cut my piece, I had it laying on my cutting plate. I was able to remove that overlay piece. It's the one that I used for my shaker card, okay? I was able to pull that off of the cutting plate. Almost all of these pieces stayed exactly where they were. So it looked almost as precise as this right here. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need to use that somehow. Like, that's really cool. I need to use that. So what I did, I carefully placed a little dot of glue on the back of each piece. I didn't touch them, besides putting a little bit of glue on. Now, if you find that they're trying to move on you, you can use like a piercing tool or something. Hold it in place, put a little glue dot on it, dot, dot, dot. Took a couple of minutes, and then I very carefully laid a piece of white cardstock over top, placed an acrylic block, one of my larger acrylic blocks on there to weigh it down, and I let it sit until that glue had dried. So what you are actually looking at, I don't know if you can tell, this is actually the back side of those die cuts. Okay, sometimes the back side of the die cuts don't really look as nice because these all look exactly the same and they have that raised little lip around the edge. I actually think they look really neat. So that is one way you can use those extra pieces. Last but not least, and actually more ideas are still coming to me. I'll share another one with you here in a second that I did not get to create, but here is one more for using those scraps. So I had some of the pieces from this card. I had some of the pieces from the shaker card left over, and I decided to, I'm sorry, not the shaker card, the green one with the crazy ribbon, and I decided to use some of those pieces to create what looks like a quilt. Isn't that neat? This is one of my favorite new embossing folders. I'll have links to all these products in the video description below, by the way, if you want to take a look at any of them or order. So I created this lovely quilt card with some of the leftovers. So let me bring these back in here. I hope this helps inspire some creativity with you and your projects. I would love to hear from you and know what you think about this tutorial. And let me know what kinds of things you would like to see in the future. So if you're interested in any of the products, you can order using the links below. I truly appreciate those of you who order with me. You will receive a personal thank you in the mail from me. You can look forward to that. Thanks so much. Let me know if you have questions. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.